Hello, welcome everyone to our first webinar in a series of 4 on cloud security. So today we're going to talk about the security challenges of migrating to the cloud. There's quite a few aspects here that we can talk about. First, I would like to briefly introduce Secura for those of you who do not know Secura yet. And of course, I will introduce myself, the moderator, and with me is the presenter for today, Ricardo. Secura, of course, is a digital security expert company, started out in the year 2000. And well, over the years, we've built up a large customer base in the Netherlands, and we are now also expanding internationally. We like to link security to standards, metrics, and certifications. And the news, of course, in January, which was pretty good for us, is that since January we have now been becoming a Bureau Veritas company. So Bureau Veritas has taken a majority stake in our company. So we're very excited about that, and this will help us internationally expand also. So, quick introduction of myself. My name is Ralph Monen. I am the Technical Director, aka CTO of Secura. Many of you might have already met me or spoken to me. Besides being CTO, I also very much like to still get my hands dirty and, so to speak, work with customers on projects. And today, for our webinar, I've brought Ricardo. Ricardo is our foremost cloud expert. He's also the holder of, I think, the most certifications in our company, or one of the at least top 3 certificate holders. Ricardo will introduce himself a little more in a minute. So Ricardo is from Mexico. We make lots of jokes about that, but he is actually a very great expert. And besides collecting certificates, he's also written a couple of books. And he has a background so as an entrepreneur, but has also worked for the Big Four, EY, and others. So Ricardo, I don't know, after my introduction, if you have anything else to add, but
no, thanks for the introduction. Let's just dive in. So yeah, thank you for coming. This is the first webinar of the cloud webinar series, and yeah, we're going to be talking about the cloud migration, the processes, the challenges. Then we're going to be talking in the second part of the series about the cloud architecture and how to improve their security and how to use built-in security with the cloud. And then we're going to be jumping directly to crystal box assessments and the common cloud misconfigurations and how the vulnerabilities and the type of risk and they change from on-premise to cloud. And the final one will be how to create an efficient cloud vulnerability management program. So it's going to be during the whole year, 1 per quarter. So yeah, if you like this one, just stay tuned. So the agenda of today. The first thing that we're going to be talking is the benefits of moving to the cloud. I promise to be short and sweet in this one because I know that everybody in this webinar knows which ones are the benefits. So short and sweet, I promise. Then we're going to be talking about the inherent risk of the cloud. So cloud is not all like good if you do it incorrectly. So which ones are the risk of just being in the cloud just by being in the cloud? The third one is the strategies and challenges in the migration. Let's say that that's the meat of the sandwich of today. Like that's the main thing that we're going to be talking about. Finally, how to be more secure, the pro security tips. We're going to end up with a Q&A, and I have to tell you that during the webinar we're going to have polls. So some of the polls we will be using it to change the topic of the webinar. So with that, the first poll is which cloud provider do you use? So based on your answers and your responses, I will try to steer the webinar to that. So can you please tell me which cloud providers do you use or do you intend to use? So the options are AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, hybrid, and to be decided. So if you can please answer that, yeah, I will try to address the webinar accordingly. If you're not seeing the poll for some strange reason, you can just put it in the comments and then Ralph will let me know. So let's give a couple more seconds. Okay, I think that it's enough. So the results, Azure, AWS, cool, we have people using Google Cloud. Hybrid, okay, to be decided. So for what I'm seeing of the answers, I don't know if you can see it, AWS and Azure are kind of the same. This is, to be honest, not what we were expecting, or because most of our clients are Azure, but it's strange because most of the world is using AWS. So AWS is by far the biggest one. But yeah, most of our clients are either hybrid or Azure. So I think that those two answers are kind of the same. So I will address the webinar accordingly. So the first thing, or the introduction, is the cloud is a different way of thinking. And this is a slide that is in all the cloud presentations and all the cloud understanding of cloud everywhere. So it's called the shared responsibility model. And that means that depending on the type of service that you decide to use, you control more or less of the cloud. So for example, if you go on-prem, that is this column, you have to control your hardware, your virtualization, your operating system, everything, containers, data. But if you go all the way to software as a service, you only control the data and the configuration. So who controls all the blue stuff? The cloud provider. That's why we put it blue. Yes. So just to give another example, platform as a service, the cloud provider control hardware, virtualization, operating system, and containers, and we as a company control the rest. So that's another way of thinking. We are not in control of everything. So diving a little bit further of why it's different, or why cloud is a different way of thinking. The traditional infrastructure is dedicated and immutable, or in general, dedicated and immutable. We all forget, the people that it's my age or a little bit older, we all remember that the IPs of our servers when we were we were working. So we knew by memory that the IP.18 was the, I don't know, the mail server. And that was the way, and we were able to identify that server, and it was the server of that stuff. But now it's a very dynamic infrastructure. The IPs change, the network change, the servers go up and down. So it's very different, the cloud. There's a full responsibility model on-premise that we control all the column of all the stack, and in shared responsibility, we obviously share the responsibility. And in a traditional infrastructure, we have separate teams. What do I mean with that? We have a team that will buy, or probably buy, the servers, the rack, the networking, connected, the security is another team, the developers are another team. So I remember when I was launching some website or whatever, I just talk to someone and then wait for 2 months for the server to be spin off, and then I have access to the server and then talk to the sysadmin. It was a mess. And now we have a team, a huge team, that is called DevSecOps. So it's the developers, security, and operation. A developer now in cloud can spin off their own servers. They are in charge of their security, or in general in charge of the security. So that's a huge difference. That's a huge difference in the way that you think and the way that you understand cloud. And on-prem, it's a very mature industry. So the big changes of on-prem was when Windows changed from, I don't know, 2016 to 2020, or whenever XP was yeah, it was not a thing anymore, it was not supported anymore. Those were the biggest, huge changes. And on-premise was a very mature industry, and cloud is super agile. If you are using AWS and you don't use it for 2 weeks, and then you go back to the website, then everything changed. And they launched 62 new services, and it's something that it goes really fast, and you can control, for example, satellites with AWS. So yeah, it's difficult to keep a pace, but yeah, it's also really good because there's always new stuff. And the traditional cloud is imperative, and the cloud infrastructure is declarative. So what do I mean with that? Imperative is when you go to the server and make the changes. Declarative is when you tell the cloud provider what you want, and they just do it. It's normally done by infra as a code. So the way that I understood it a long time ago is when your car breaks down, and you have a friend that is a mechanic, you call your friend and say, hey, my car is not working, and he, for imperative, he tells you all the steps that you have to do, and you are actually opening the hood and fixing your car. There's no insurance, there's no nothing, and you are the actual one that is tinkering with the system. If you do something wrong, it will break. But of course, you control everything. That's on premise. If you need a change in the server, you go and change it. On cloud is different. You tell the cloud provider what you need, and they just figure it out. So in this example, we have an auto-scaling group with 2 servers. So this is a very good example of declarative. So I tell AWS, in this case, or Azure, I need 2 servers from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., I only need 1 server because the workload is lower. So AWS knows that I always need to have 2 servers from that time frame. If one of the servers dies or have a problem or whatever, they will just eliminate the server and put a new one. At 9 p.m., they will eliminate 1 server and keep 1. That's what we mean with declarative. And we can do everything. And since the servers are being spawned by AWS, you have to tell AWS how to do it and how to install the application. So it's very different. And declarative, it's amazing if you do it correctly, because there's documentation, there's security, because you don't need to open the ports, management ports, SSH or RDP. So yeah, this is a really good example of declarative and yeah, dynamic infrastructure, because the IPs will change a lot and you don't control them. So as I promised, the part of the cloud benefits is going to be short and sweet. There's a lot of economic benefits of the cloud. There's a scale, obviously, because Azure, AWS, they're buying thousands and thousands of servers, and so they have discounts. It's their core business. They do that. And this is not an accountancy course, but we change from CapEx to OpEx. What is CapEx? It's capital expenditure. And what is OpEx? Operative expenditure. We bought a server 6 years ago. We need to buy a server, go and pay it in cash up front, or pay it. And in operation, you just pay for what you use. So that's cloud. Can be great, can be bad. I will tell you a story of one of my friends working R&D in the UK, and he was doing some machine learning analysis. And he was super happy because he was able to do really complex analysis for like 10 pounds. So there are really good benefits about doing that. I will tell you the rest of the story later. Those are the benefits. Architecture benefits, there's a lot of automation. There's a lot of built-in tools. There's a lot of capabilities. As I explained, you can even control satellites with this. So you can do a lot with cloud, and it's easier because it's the same provider, so it's everything connected. There's a semi-automatic compliance. What do I mean with semi-automatic, and why do I put quotes in there? Because the part that it's controlled by the cloud provider it's compliant in general to everything. So the part that you control, it's not compliant, so it's the part that you're in charge. So let's say that you need to follow HIPAA. The part that it's blue, controlled by the cloud provider, is compliant already. And there's a built-in security. There are operating system images. If you use serverless, microservices, encryption roles, encryptions, everything, there's a built-in security. So if you do it correctly, in general, it's more secure, even backups. That's everything is automatic. So from the point of view of Secura, we understand the technology and the risks and everything with this new shell. So we are going to be explaining the risks from 3 different perspectives: people, process, and technology. So let's dive into the technology risk of using the cloud. You have way less visibility in the stack. So what is a stack? It's this column. So if you decide to go platform as a service or container as a service, let's say that you're using platform as a service, you are not seeing how the containers are being deployed, the operating system or anything. You need to trust Azure or AWS that they are doing it correctly and they're doing it securely for you. And it's literally trust, because you don't have any way of checking that. But yeah, that's the first main risk. There's less visibility in the stack. You will probably need new tools. That's a fact. Your normal on-prem tools will not work in cloud, or at least you will have to connect them somewhere or make some kind of configuration. there's a lot of architectural complexity and reworking. So if you have stuff that are already working on-prem, you will have to modify it at least a little bit to be working in cloud, and all modifications have risks. Encryption and networking are different. Encryption and networking, as we mentioned before, are in per se secure in general, but if you use, for example, Azure, that we see a lot of people using Azure, you know that the key vaults, for example, are open by default to the whole internet. The blob storages are open to the whole internet. AWS S3 buckets are open to the internet in general, open to the internet. If you deploy by code, there's no alert or anything. So you have to be aware of those kind of things. Encryption, the same. Who control your keys? So there's a stuff that you need to address. There's a lot of shadow IT if you decide to go to the cloud, and even if you don't decide to go to the cloud because your company is probably already in the cloud without you knowing it. What is shadow IT? Is the IT that management or it's not aware of, or no one is aware of. So let's say that we have a developer that just spin off a server and it's running Windows XP because he wants back compatibility, and then he leaves the company. And that Windows XP is exposed to the internet. So yeah, that's shadow IT. Nobody's patching it, nobody is decommissioning it, no one. It's there, the shadow IT. And that's a big risk of going to the cloud, and there's also risk in general. And moving between cloud providers or providers can be difficult or expensive. What do I mean with this? Going to the cloud in general is cheap or free in general. But moving out of the cloud is expensive because all the data that comes into the cloud doesn't have a charge, but all the data that you pull from the cloud has a charge. So yeah, just make the decision wisely of which cloud provider do you pick. And there's an increased attack surface. That's a fact. We have a lot of clients that are very secure and very mature with their on-premise environments, and we have been pen testing them for years. But once they jump to the cloud and they make some basic configuration errors, we can attack them from the cloud. So yeah, there's a lot of examples there. For example, if you don't put multi-factor authentication in your users and you are using Office 365 and your password policy is still weak, then there's a lot of chances that people won't be able to log into there. In the past month, we were able to log into an HR account. So you can imagine all the HR files being accessible to attackers from the internet. So it's a mess. People and processes are the biggest risk for cloud. You have something amazing called the management plane, but it's also a problem. What is the management plane? It's a website where you control Azure or where you control AWS. So the problem is that it's in general exposed to the internet. So anybody anywhere in the world can try to access it. So it's kind of the new domain controllers. So if you lose control of the management plane, you have a huge problem, especially if it's a high privilege account. The same with keys and roles. The keys, the access keys, I mean here, or the roles, if you have very permissive roles. We were doing some AWS assessment, and the Lambda stuff that was exposed to the internet had the permissions to create administrators. So you have to be aware that you are exposing to the internet something that can create and compromise the whole environment. So just be aware of that. There's a false sense of security with cloud. A lot of people think that by moving to the cloud, they will be more secure. And in general, it's true. But it's also a false sense of security with, for example, operating system images. If you use the Ubuntu or the whatever operating system images provided by AWS or Azure, they don't necessarily are updated, or you don't know when they were updated. And if you have a developer just pulling the system image and just spit it off and assuming that it will be safe, that's not the case. So you can do an example, just run a sys-check on those, and you will be amazed at the problems that they have. The expenses are different. I will finish the story of my friend doing RD in another company. He was super happy because he was able to do all the computing stuff that he needed to do in 10 minutes, but he left everything running with his credit card there. So the expenses became from 10 or 15 euros to 4,000 in one day. So imagine this in a company. So it can be a problem. They have your credit card and they will not just accept that, sorry, it was an error. And you have new knowledge and collaborative teams, that's a fact. And you have more to configure, update, and maintain. So if we go to the biggest security threats in the cloud environment, you can see that 62% of the problems are misconfigurations in the cloud. And the unauthorized access and the hacking of accounts is roles and keys. So if you manage that, you are controlling most of the stuff. So this makes migration challenging. So can you please tell me how advanced are you in your cloud migration? So the options are: we don't think we should move now, we are good, we're considering to move in the following year or soon-ish, we move part of our infrastructure already, hybrid, I know because of the past poll that a lot of people it's already working in a hybrid mode, and we are fully in the cloud. Can you please tell me that? Give it 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Yeah, Sasha, can you show me please? So yeah, we move part of our infrastructure already. Yeah, we know our clients. So we know that most of, can you pull that away, please? So we know that most of our clients work in a hybrid environment. So there are 4 main migration methodologies for the cloud, and we are going to explain all of them. So the first one is lift and shift. What is lift and shift? Is when you literally pull your infrastructure, just grab an image of whatever is running in your virtual machines and you move it to the cloud. As little modification as possible, and normally running with infrastructure as a service. And you don't re-architect your environment. That's lift and shift. So an example of lift and shift is Ralph dressed as like he is now for I don't know 10 degrees outside in the Netherlands. He's just lift and shift and live in Tulum or in Cancun. He will have a great time, an amazing time, great food, great weather, but his clothes will probably cause him to melt. So it's a if you just lift and shift your infrastructure, you will have the advantages or some advantages like the good food and the good weather, but still you need to understand your environment and adapt. So you may be missing a lot of benefits if you just do that. And the default is not always secure. If you just pull your domain controller and leave it in the cloud, you will most likely have problems. So second one is ad hoc. So you provide guidelines and guardrails to the team to move, and then you let them move. And it's kind of a flip of a coin. If your teams are good and well trained and everything, that will go amazingly well. And the key here is to trust but verify. It's good for companies that work with different teams or with different organizational units. So you let them move at their own time and their own pace. Be careful with shadow IT and be careful of losing control. That's the key. And you need to train people. We've seen a lot. When we talk to developers, they say, my management asked me to move to the cloud, but they are not providing the training. So you have to be aware that if you ask them to do that, you need to provide training. And trust but verify. That's key. Serverless, it's almost designing by scratch and moving everything to the cloud the way that the cloud was meant to be, as much serverless and much software as a service as possible, re-architecturing everything. It's really complicated to do and move everything to the cloud, and it's almost always done by most agile companies or smaller companies or startups. And be careful with the false sense of security. Just by being in the cloud, that doesn't mean that you are safe. And configuration and deployment are the biggest issues or security challenges. Finally, hybrid state. That's what we see with most of our clients. The stuff that it's working on-prem will remain working on-prem. But the thing that you are developing in the future or you are changing, it's going to be deployed and think in re-architecture for the cloud. I think that makes a lot of sense. But you have to be aware that you have to maintain 2 different infrastructures. And there's an increased attack surface, a lot. And there attackers like us or pen testers can pivot from the cloud environment to the on-premise environment. So be careful with that. So for example, Just try going to Azure portal and just try to log in, and you will see that all the usernames are listed, all the emails, all the phone numbers are listed by default, even if you don't have an Azure, everything moved to the cloud. So just be very careful about that. And so let's deep dive into hybrid identities. This is going to be just three slides, very technical slides. But whenever you're connecting your on-prem Active Directory or your on-prem IAM to the cloud, you have three ways of doing. Password hash synchronization. So essentially you send all your hashes to the cloud, and if the hashes match, they can go in. Pass-through authentication. Whenever a user requests Azure AWS access, there's a connection between cloud to on-prem, and all the authentication is done on-prem. And federation is, you say that trust, that this domain trust Azure and Azure trust my local domain. So it's a question that we get all the time. That's why we put this very, very technical slide here. And because our clients ask us, which one should we do for hybrid environments? And the question is it's a matter of policies and strategies and management strategies. So for example, do you allow your hashes to be saved in the cloud or by anybody else, or stuff like that? And based on that, you can make the decision. If you want to see this slide, the video will be recorded, so you can go back. Yeah, that's the cool thing. So I have like 6 minutes more. So our top security tips, that's the key part of the presentation. And I have a question for you before I jump that. Can we pen test the cloud? No, it's only auditing. Yes, but you need written permission of Azure AWS. Yes, but you can test with different rules. And yes, but it's your infrastructure. So can you tell me if you think that we can pen test the cloud? Give 10 seconds or so. Yeah, so, can you show me, please? So yes, you can test with some rules. Exactly that, perfectly that. So which are those rules? In general, you cannot social engineer workers of AWS or Azure. That's the first rule. And the second rule, no DOS, no denial of services. If you do that, in general, you're going to be fine and okay. But be careful, because if it's done by a non-professional, it can be real expensive. So in the example of the servers that were being deployed, by the amount of CPU usage, if a pen tester just stress all your services and all your servers, you will spin off a lot more of infrastructure. So just be careful with that. So which are the security tips? We put it into two categories. The cloud specific ones. Train your people. Realize that cloud is different. Please, 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 cloud is different. The logic is different. The teams need to be different. Everything. So cloud is different. Please get your authorization, access management right. Infra code. Do infra code reviews if you are deploying like that. Be careful with your keys. Be careful with your access keys, and prepare for certification schemes. And the point of that is that the legislations are coming. We will not be in this land of no one for far. And the general security still applies. Security awareness and behavior are your biggest, or one of the biggest concerns. If a user gets compromised, or a user puts their password in a post-it and there's no multi-factor authentication, then you're probably, you will have a bad day. Application and infra penetration test also apply. So web application, if you put a web application in the cloud, you still need to pen test it, because if we get remote code access or remote code execution there, you will have a problem, because we will likely be able to control all your cloud infrastructure for there. And security maturity reviews are key. So which migration should I do, or is my company ready to be in the cloud? Just assess how mature they are, and then you can decide this. Where I'm comfortable with the risk, and assess the gap, and act accordingly. So there are a lot of cloud certification schemes. I will not go through them, but the point of this is that legislation will likely follow. So start or try to be as much compliant as possible, because with the amount of hacks, of cloud hacks that we are seeing, we will be legislated soon. So the conclusions, really fast. Cloud is a different way of thinking. There are challenges in all the cloud environments, technology-wise, people-wise, process-wise. There are multiple strategies for a cloud migration. Each has their pros and cons, ad hoc, lift and shift, future state, everything, cloud. can be more secure. Cloud in general is more secure, but it depends on your configuration. There's a lot more to configure, update, and maintain. You need to know that. And there are risks. If the risks are addressed, then the benefits for the business are amazingly big. With that, I will invite you to our next cloud series, and after that, we go to question and answers. So if you have any question, can you please put it in the question part? So while that, we have the next cloud series will be architecture and how to improve your security. And there are another couple of webinars coming in April from Secura that are not in the same topic, but industrial products and certifications and IoT. So if you like that, just subscribe to our monthly newsletter, or just go to the Secura website. With that, questions? 30 minutes exactly? Yes, I'm amazing. 11:30.
Yes. So thank you, Ricardo, for that. Very enlightening. Yeah, we of course are cloud users ourselves, and I can personally indeed also confirm that you should not leave stuff running in your cloud.
If I may add a tip, there is another tip, that is, if you're going to be playing with the cloud, set an alarm. So I have an alarm for $1, and my Azure subscription, you can use certain stuff for free. So if you put the alarm of $1 and to actually set the configuration alert, you will get a configuration whenever they are charging you. So that's an amazing tip. Please put an alarm. $1, $10, $5,000 if you're a company or whatever.
Indeed, that's quite a good tip, because setting bounds on that is can be very beneficial. So we have a question from Jagannathan Rama, and then his name is unfortunately cut off by the GoToWebinar control panel. So sorry about that. But the question is, could you please explain about tenant segregation within a cloud? So how segregated are tenants?
So in theory, the names may vary, but in theory, subscriptions, tenants, organization units, depending on the cloud provider that you use, should be separate in general. So if you don't put any peer-to-peer connection or VPN connection or whatever, they should be separate. So let's say that you in Azure, you have 3 different subscriptions. They should not be able to talk to each other unless you do it on purpose. So that's a good explanation. That's a good example of security by design, on security by that. But if let's say that you have something serverless, or you have a virtual machine, that you make the configuration of the virtual machine to be able to connect to other subscriptions, what a hacker will do, or what we were going to do during pen test, is to try to find those insecurities in the borders, let's say it like that. So to answer your question, in general, they are separate, and in general, they are segregated. And in general, if you don't do anything, those should work and function in their own way. But there are a lot of ways that you can accidentally or on purpose link it. And that's something that a hacker or us during a pen test will likely abuse. It's the same that on-prem and cloud. In general, they are separate. There's no reason, or not built-in reason of having that connection. But in practice, if you are going to use Active Directory on-prem and Active Directory in the cloud, you will likely have a connection. So if you have, for example, an agent, that agent running in your Active Directory have a lot of rights. If that agent gets compromised, then I will be able to jump from your on-prem to the cloud, or vice versa. Or if I'm able to get all the hashes from an Active Directory running in the cloud, I will be able to most likely jump from your cloud to on-prem. So in general, all that is segregated. That's the message that I'm trying to give you here. But yeah, accidentally on purpose, you can link them, and then you have the pivoting problems of a hacker.
Okay, thank you, Ricardo, for that that answer. I might add one little note there, that if you are, however, talking about a SaaS solution, then the multiple tenants of the same SaaS solution are also dependent, of course, on vulnerabilities within the application layer, and it's not so much cloud question, but of course, if there is a programming error in the web application that allows one customer to access another customer's data, that is not a cloud problem, but it can happen in the cloud.
Yeah, an architecture problem also. You have everything running in the same database, for example.
Yeah.
Or you have a role problem that I can become admin, and then if I became admin, I can see other tenant talking about software as a service. So yeah, in general, it's the same. If you use Office 365, then in general, your tenant of Office 365 should be very separate to my tenant of Office 365. But of course, it's just software running in infrastructure. So if the software is insecure, then the tenant bonders are very easy to jump, let's say it like that.
All right. Then we have a next question from Michael van der Meulen, who asks, as an internal auditor with an Azure cloud running company, what would you think I should verify in this Azure environment? So as an internal auditor, what would he look at first?
So the first thing is, it's a more a policy question and a strategy question, is to check if your company, its strategy and policies and risk and everything is translated accordingly to the cloud. I don't know if that's an audit question or it's your domain as an auditor, but it's the first thing that you need to do. So let's say that you have the policy of all the data or all the important data should remain in the Netherlands. Then there's a lot of configurations in the cloud that will replicate your information to other countries or other places in the world. So that's something that you really need to understand, your policies and how the cloud is deployed. If you go a little bit deeper, a little bit technical, there are a lot of pre-made checks that are very basic and standard, that it's a good way to start, like the sys checks that will give you like a list of things that you need to cover to be kind of a little bit secure, or the baseline for security. But of course, the key is to understand that the cloud is different, and understand that understand the cloud and try to make checks and make it's complicated. It's the same that on-prem is check that your policies are being correctly applied to the cloud.
Yeah, and another thing that comes to mind, of course, is that where the larger cloud providers, they have a lot of audits already being done, and they can provide assurance reports, not just on stuff like ISO 27000, but they can actually have better assurance and provide that also. I think you have one or two in the slides, right? Some of these certifications there from the Cloud Security Alliance. So you have the but the main thing here, of course, to also take into account that there are a lot of smaller cloud providers and also other cloud service providers that build their services on top of AWS or Azure or whatever. And well, they should also be able to provide their assurance reports. And it's not enough just to go to the Microsoft site and say, okay, we have our ISO 27000, or which one is it for privacy? And you have to dig a little deeper and not just assume that the scope of those assurance reports also covers your services. That would also be a matter of policy, of course. Do you require your cloud providers to actually have and provide those assurance reports? So that would be the starting point, I guess, for most auditors.
And for you, Michael, you need to understand that this blue part is already compliant to what Ralph was saying. Almost to everything, SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, HIPAA, CIS compliant, everything, it's already compliant, because this is the infrastructure that is controlled by Azure, AWS. Of course, I'm talking about the big ones, Google, stuff like that. They are compliant to almost everything. But the red part is the part that you control, or your developers control. So if you need to focus, just ask them, which service are they using? Are they using infrastructure as a service? Then you need to be aware that you have to check everything from the operating system up. If they're using function as a service, you only have to check the code, the data, and the configuration, for example, maybe the networking. So it's a really complicated question, Michael, but it's a way of how your company is yeah, thinking and understanding and the strategies of moving to the cloud.
Yeah. All right. Our own Dirk Jan has a question. Can we always trust the cloud provider? In other words, if we configure the cloud space correctly, can we trust that the reality and the implementation is configured accordingly? So if we set that switch, do we know that it really is done?
In general, yes. You know, in general, but there was an example of a cloud provider, a big cloud provider in France 3 or 4 weeks ago, that a data center burned down. It was a huge data center in France. So, you know, like you are trusting them with your data, but if yeah, if there's a fire and then everything is lost, then everything is lost. And the same with there's some, for example, have been discovered some Lambda vulnerabilities or stuff like that. So in general, the answer is yes, or the likelihood of someone being able to exploit Azure is way lower than the likelihood of someone to exploit my company on-prem. I can tell you that. But also Azure is a very juicy target for all the hackers in the world. So I can imagine that it's very secure, but vulnerabilities can happen, disasters can happen. So it's yeah, in general, you should be fine, and in general, you can architecture correctly. So have different zones and putting everything in different regions and having backups in the other side of the world and all the stuff, and try to be more secure, or managing your own encryption keys and stuff like that to avoid those kind of problems. But in general, it's a trust issue, because all the blue stuff you don't control. So it's also a trust issue. They are big, good companies that they know what they're doing, but still it's a trust issue.
Yes, we've seen that also in the past few weeks, of course, where Microsoft has had some availability issues, one even globally, but other ones locally in the US and in Europe with regards to authentication. And yeah, I think most of the Azure users have been impacted in the recent few weeks. So the availability and trust that we think is, you know, implicit in these cloud providers is not always, should not always be taken for granted. So I've one last question for you, Ricardo. So what would your top 3 measures say top 3 be when migrating to the cloud? So what, yeah, is there anything you can say that you must do this when migrating to the cloud?
Yes, train your people. I think that's a key. Train your people, understand the cloud, understand that cloud is a different way of thinking. That's that's my top advice of this talk. Cloud is different. It's a different way of thinking. It's just a different beast. It's a different way of understanding it. A very technical and practical tip is enable multi-factor authentication and check your password policy. So don't go with 8 character passwords to the cloud, and because every very slightly competent hacker in the world will be able to hack you just by password spraying if you have 5,000 users. Another, yeah, I think that those are my 2.
What is password spraying, Ricardo?
Sorry, yes. So password spraying is if you have a list of users. So let's say that you're able to pull from LinkedIn, because there are tools to do that, 2,000 emails of people working in your company. I will try the password, I know, welcome1 or password 123 in all the accounts. And then I will get a lot of hits eventually. And then if your cloud is wrongly configured or very lax in the configuration, and there's no multi-factor authentication, and I get a good account, I will be able to log into your management portal and change stuff, or at least see all the users, send emails. If you're using Office 365, see the files. From within your infrastructure, I can send phishing emails. So it's not the same if I get an email from outside that I get an email from ricardo.sanchez@secura.com to all the Secura employees. So it's just yeah, it's an attack surface. It's a new attack surface. And I know the third tip for everyone, Ralph, is that understanding that cloud is an entry point for on-prem. So even if you're super secure on-prem, the fact that you're moving to the cloud, that you also have to be secure there. So it's also an entry point. So we have to be careful with that. We have very maturity security clients that by opening cloud, they are really lowering their security stance or the security posture.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ricardo. That brings us to the end of this webinar, right bang on time. So thanks everyone for attending. It was, to me at least, very enlightening. Any questions you have, we can follow up in the in email. I think Shazia, our hostess, has a way of getting these questions within the GoToWebinar control or GoToWebinar application. But we can always follow up unanswered questions. So just type them in the box, and we will make sure that these are answered afterwards. Of course, this whole webinar has been recorded and will be made available later on our website, and we will post it on LinkedIn also. So if you missed the start or want to provide a colleague with the same information, then that is possible also.
We do training.
Signing off.
We do
Sorry?
training. We do training,
Of course.
cloud training. We do cloud assessment. So if you need it, just ask for Ricardo whenever you ask for this, and then I'll be there.
Great. Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, Shazia, and everyone setting up the tech at the office. And see you next time.